My wife, 35F, and I, 35M, have been married for 15 years and we've been together for 20 years. We have 2 kids, 12, 14. We absolutely adore and work tirelessly to provide the best possible life for them. For the past 3 years, things have been somewhat bumpy. I understand that our kids are at an age where they require a ton of our attention and resources with school, band, club sports, and other extracurriculars, and I'm aware of the physical and emotional toll that can have on marriages. However, for these past 3 years, my wife and I have had very little intimacy and very little sex, and we've been trying very hard to work on that aspect of our relationship. This past year has been the most difficult and by far the darkest year in our marriage. We didn't talk very much. We essentially became roommates co-parenting our kids under the same roof. It was very depressing and very demoralizing. It was to the point where we began contemplating divorce, and it became very dark and gloomy in the household because of that. We began seeking help with both individualized therapy and couples therapy, and it seems to have helped some. Little by little we started to get along and started to have deeper conversations about what our marriage looks like and what we would love for it to look like. This is where it gets tough. As time passed, my wife started to tell me she no longer was in love with me and that she only saw me as a best friend. That she only loved me in a very platonic way, and this was one of the main reasons she didn't have any desire for intimacy and let alone sex. This was very shocking to me, and quite frankly, I was devastated. I became angry and depressed, and I couldn't fathom the thought that I was no longer wanted or desired by the person I felt completely in love with. Things began to deteriorate again, and not long after, we were back to square one. I sat down with her one afternoon and had a heart-to-heart and began to ask questions about where the root of this problem lies, and her answer was, "I don't know, and that I have built up resentment towards you, but I don't know where it stems from." As you can imagine, this provides very little to no insight into how to approach this. I'm puzzled, I'm frustrated, and I do not know what to do at this point. Currently, we've arrived at a place where she says that she has no sex drive and no desire for intimacy or connection. She says that all she wants is simply companionship, which basically means our co-parenting roommate dynamic. I asked her what I could possibly do, or what is it about me that is so unattractive or undesirable, and her response is always, "I don't know." She stated that she does love me, but it's not the same. That she has been feeling disconnected for years and that our marriage just takes up too much work. Her focus is only the children for now, and that my co-parenting contributions are meaningful to her in our home. I'm at a loss, and I'm mainly venting about my frustration. It's tough to realize that the person you love has no feelings for you. I feel like at this point I'm only here to contribute financially and as a parent. I feel like what she means with companionship is that she's comfortable with the convenience of having a good father for our kids and my financial contribution to the household. In regard to intimacy and or sex, she basically told me that it's not something she's interested in or wants at this time. She mentioned that the only way to get to a point for any of that is to be intoxicated, which I believe is incredibly awful and very wrong. I told her I do not think forcing herself to have sex or be intimate by drinking or smoking is good, and I declined to be a part of that, which to my surprise, it upset her and made her more distant. We're both extremely honest and transparent. We've never cheated on each other, and we are always free to look through each other's phones, emails, socials, etc., and we hardly ever do. I asked her if there was someone else and she declined. Honestly, I believe her. We then peacefully went through each other's things, and as expected, it was clean. We've always been very forward, even with the hard topics, so I don't smell nor feel any foul play or infidelity. Am I wrong for declining to only be intimate or have sex when she's intoxicated? I'm firm on my stance of not partaking in this only when I'm high or drunk sex, because it doesn't sit well with me. I do not know how to help our situation, and I'm starting to become a bit anxious and desperate. We're both fairly young and healthy individuals and good looking. We both have good standing careers and are good parents. I'm just not sure how our lives could have driven us to this point. I'd love some outside perspective on this matter and some insight on how to address something like this. It feels so awful to be unwanted and undesired by my own spouse. I hate it. We did some swinging in the past. That was fun for some time. We mutually decided to stop doing it, and we have established it's not the case. When we were swinging, however, our marriage seemed to be in a good place. This is something we did disclose with our couple therapist and made sure to include it to make sure we're not neglecting an obvious potential issue. I will say, I did ask my wife if what she experienced during swinging is something that is affecting her view on our relationship, and she said it wasn't. Our swinging experience was always together, and it was very sex-driven. Nothing really emotional or poly. Truth is, I have to believe her at her word. I have no reason to distrust her. To date, she's always been very forward and never afraid of dealing things head on. No matter how painful. Comment: this issue existed long before the lifestyle. And I agree that swinging wasn't a solution in the end. Never was meant to be, it was more of discovering or exploring if she felt any different. If that was the case, we agreed we would talk about, and if we arrive at the conclusion that myself is the problem and she has no problem with other men, we would amicably part ways. However, this wasn't the case. She didn't like sex nor intimacy there either. She was very much in control of that whole swinging situation. And yes, I went along with it. What gives? It felt very organic, and it was her effort, if you will, to discovering more and learning more about our current issue. I saw it as a means of learning if I'm the problem and was very much ready to accept that. It turns out it wasn't the case. 6 years of miser sound awful. I would very much hate that. Finally, a comment on the swinging topic with actual insight. You're absolutely right about the fact that the swinging experience had things/changes that will impact our marriage and lives forever. For example, the best thing swinging taught us, even above sexual exploration, was the level of transparent and open communication it requires. We would literally have mental orgasms having dialogue with such intentionally. We implemented that in all our lives and areas, including parenting with our children. She even agrees that we're thankful for that takeaway from our swinging. Honestly, I cannot stress it enough with people here. Yes, we explored swinging, however it was actually a positive experience. When we decided to stop, it was because it felt natural and organic to just do so. In fact, we met with that couple who we meshed super well with the night before. We actually enjoyed the actual friendship and even spent time as vanilla friends. So it wasn't because of something negative. Wife mentioned that it certainly wasn't any better, and since she's not enjoying the sex, we both agreed there's no point to this. I agreed, and we moved on, and we're still friends with those people because it's great. All that said, I know, more often than not, swinging causes massive issues. However, this was something we explored in pursuit of a solution to an issue that was present way before. I think of it as taking a practical approach to trying to solve the problem. Update: I wanted to give you guys an update of how the therapy session with my wife went this week. Not sure if this is helpful or not, but I took many of the responses/comments/suggestions from my initial post and put together some things I wanted to discuss with our couples therapist to help us navigate some of the core issues that may be affecting this situation. One of the main things that is the buzzword of this has been the term resentment, and it has been really eating me up inside knowing my wife keeps telling me she doesn't know why she's resentful or doesn't know why this is affecting her emotionally/mentally. I brought this up with our therapist once again and resurfaced the conversation about being married for so long, 15 years, and being together since we are 14 years old. Our long history of growing up and how having children when she was 19 years old, me 20, significantly changed the trajectory of our lives. We experienced severe poverty and many hardships in the process, and we essentially had zero social life for the past 10 years because we were so busy raising babies, 2 kids now ages 12 and 14. She followed up with tons of questions directly mostly at my wife about her feelings towards this, and 90% of the responses were very our kids focused. It definitely felt like she was afraid of saying yes it sucked because she would feel guilt or shame because it would imply she regrets the kids. I mentioned this in the session, and the therapist encouraged her to look at this outside of the lens of being a mother and to try to view it a bit more selfishly and individually, and it was very eye-opening. My wife mentioned that she was very frustrated with the fact that we did miss out on many things in life. She also was very clear in saying, I do not think I missed out on other partners or dating or partying, but I certainly lost all my friends. This was huge because one of the big pieces that has caused a strain in our lives is how siloed and isolated we've been, again busy raising kids. I followed up by reminding her that it's important to have good friends and to make time for herself and her friendships. For the past 3+ years, we've had multiple conversations about friends and how it is important to have them in life. Especially when you have similar peers that can help in many areas of life that perhaps we have no experience navigating, and even simply for enjoyment. It has always been something my wife avoids, even though she's always been someone who needs that external stimuli. The main reason for her not investing in friends or even herself has always been the kids. Like I mentioned earlier in this post, 90% of the answers have to relate to the kids to some degree. At this point in our session, I started to feel like there was a common denominator, the kids, in most of the frustrations and problems she was experiencing. So I simply asked her, do you think you may be upset at me because I'm responsible for these kids in the sense that I got you pregnant so young? I wasn't ready, but she said that she was upset at me for that. She also followed up with the fact that she knows that's unreasonable because it takes 2 to tango. I did feel like it was progress because it kind of gave us something to work on and help alleviate some of these burdens, so we agreed to invest more time in nurturing good friendships both together and individually. Towards the end of the session, we began to discuss what actionable items we would take from this session. At this point, it was still all very ambiguous and blurry as to what the outcomes were. I was very direct and very forward in asking my wife what her plan is moving forward. Note, I had decided prior to the session that should my wife say the same thing about being a co-parenting roommate, that I would take the 180 approach and essentially do me. She started basically saying the same thing, that she doesn't have any desire to be intimate or sexual with me as of now, and that she loves me immensely and she feels bad for not being there for me, as mentioned in my first post. I also brought up the brief swinging that happened, to which for the 50th time said it wasn't a problem. I agree with her on this. This was something that was a mechanical approach for a solution to a problem that was very much inexistent when we tried this. We, both, really have no issue to this. We know it happened, we tried it and mutually stopped and turned the page. I also brought up other life events that may cause resentment, and really we ended up not getting anywhere else as far as the root for resentment, which was discouraging. I then basically expressed to my wife that I will not be okay with that arrangement. I told her that I've really done everything I can and that this issue really has reached a point where it has nothing to do with me or require me to do anything that I'm currently not doing. I was very direct in saying that I will not be accepting this dynamic and that I need to be with someone who is actively involved in our marriage, works towards resolutions, and is very much interested in maintaining an active intimacy and sexual relationship. I expressed how I am not going to be a convenience and that there was more to life than being roommates and co-parents. I made sure she knows I love her dearly and that I do want this to work for the better. I also told her that I'm fully committed to this marriage so long as she is as well, and that if she wasn't, it's okay. However, I will not be a part of something where these efforts are not reciprocated. I told her I have no plans of leaving, and I do not want a divorce. However, I made it clear that if this dynamic continues, that divorce will be the only outcome. Of course, tears were involved and it was a very bleak and sad ending to the session. Still nothing was said and I walked out very discouraged and very determined to start working on the 180 as soon as we left the room. It's painful and very difficult because much of the 180 requires you to be very short and cold and transactional. The saddest part is realizing, this dynamic already is very cold and transactional. Here is where it gets very interesting. I started working on implementing many of the 180 recommendations that same day. I mentioned to my wife that, hey, things are going to be a bit different moving forward. I'm going to honor her roommate/co-parent dynamic without reproach, and that it should be no mistake that I am not happy here and I am never going to be okay with it, but I am done working on it if she wasn't going to work on it. She agreed and went to bed. I started to build distance and started to basically focus on myself. Very short and transactional. She asked for help on some of her personal things, to which I declined, and it really shocked her. She was upset, saying I was being petulant. I explained to her that she is now fully in charge of her own life and her own issues. We didn't talk all day and we only spoke when necessary. Few days I keep this going and she's very visibly upset and stressed. I typically react to that with gestures of help or nurturing, but I didn't this time. That night she was crying, telling me she's stressed and she thinks something is wrong with me because I'm indifferent. I simply listened. Then I told her that this is the dynamic she proposed and that I'm simply, much like her, taking care of myself and focusing on myself. I'm not going to lie, it has been very hard to be cold and distant because, as I mentioned before, I love her and I wish I could hold her and love on her. However, I know this is somewhat manipulative in a way, just to get her way and still keep me in the friend zone. So I've been staying the course. We're now going on a week of this 180 and let's just say, there has been many changes on her side. I think she is starting to realize there is more to me than just friends and co-parenting. I sent her a text a few days ago essentially itemizing bills and separating the financial responsibilities 50-50, and she lost her shit. She basically told me it was out of left field, to which I responded, hey, friends go in 50-50 and as your friend I expect nothing less. This was very eye-opening because it gave me a glimpse of I'm really taken for granted and how her level of comfort and convenience at my expense is really overlooked. I pushed through anyways and basically told her that this is the new dynamic she asked for and that it's still a bargain because she would have to be 100% if she was on her own. I'll wrap up with this. While the 180 has been working in many different areas, I am still very much sad about the overall situation. There have been many eye-opening statements being said and realization that have not been pleasant to encounter. It has also sparked new energy and new efforts on her side as well. She's definitely seeking to talk to me more often, and while it's hard to turn down, I hope if things improve, this continues to happen. I've also noticed that she's making more time for herself aside from being a mom, which is huge because she pretty much neglected herself for years. I'm very pleased seeing her be more herself. My hope is that as we work on ourselves, the marriage improves. There really is no telling at this point where this will go. We are very much cordial and amicable even to this day, and it's a very good sign. Boundaries are set and expectations are very clear, and I feel that no matter the outcome, I will be at peace with everything that has been done. We're still going to continue the couples therapist until we either rekindle our marriage or end up in divorce. I feel like having this non-biased third party really helps as a witness and as a guide through this. No matter what, I will always love my wife. However, I will not participate in a sexless, intimacy-less marriage because we both deserve better. Thank you all for all the kind words and recommendations and feedback. This will be my last post on this topic and I wish you all the best. Comments, Cat's Gambit. So, I'm going to assume that your wife has a lucrative job and you are both going 50-50 on childcare, as you both work and share children. Because otherwise, this approach is just plain financially abusive. And if you're planning on saying I won't pay the bills unless you have sex with me, sexually abusive as well. Assuming that is the case and you aren't a total puss, I'm actually interested in how this works out for you. I feel like I'm in an unstated, similar situation. We both work and have blended finances, but we don't go to bed together or eat together, have barely any intimacy, a kiss or two, hugs every couple days, and spend maybe 8 hours a week together, just the three of us, him, me, and the toddler. Even less, just the two of us, maybe 3 hours a week. Otherwise, he is on his game, or out playing sports, watching YouTube, or whatever else he does. It barely feels like a friend situation, let alone a marriage. I'm curious how she handles it. As the spouse that presumably was pulling away first, I hope you keep us updated. Op. Yes, we both have degrees, good careers, and while I make significantly more money, her salary is very proficient and above average. The 50-50 was not to cripple nor hurt her financially, that is cruel, but mostly to send a message on what a roommate dynamic looks like in the real world. I really dislike how people immediately jump to conclusions about the finances as a way of manipulating her. It's not the case at all. Plenty of money left over after bills. However, 50-50 means she has less whatever money and the understanding that roommates share everything equally. Prior to this 180 approach, we did everything together and with our kids. We always saw ourselves as a unit that do things together. Both alone and with the kids too. That's changed now, where I'm choosing to focus on more independent type of pastimes and focus. That is what has sparked her reaction and realization of there's more than just roommates here. The lone jackal. How does one dump half of the household expenses on the other person if they share a bank account? Or are your finances kept separately? Just curious how this would work if applied to my life. Op. Excellent question. We shared everything. The proposed 50-50 was suggesting we place the necessary amount to pay bills in the same account and any leftover money can be deposited to a new account. I think this is why she was very upset. She felt a huge loss of control knowing she won't be able to monitor my finances. Also, she felt a huge loss in her leftover money with this arrangement and saw that I would keep significantly more of my own. This is still being worked out because I think she is calling my bluff here, but my plan is to notify her next week as I modify my direct deposit and open a new account. It will definitely be more real there. To be clear, for all the trolls here, yes, she will have less leftover money after responsibilities and it's still enough to live on. Example, for reference, assume I make $3,000 a month, she makes $1,000 a month. Responsibilities are $1,000 a month. So she'd contribute $500 and I would contribute $500. Where before she would contribute only $250. This is the last comment I'll add regarding money and finances. She's fine and she's not hurting. I promise. Interesting. She has no shortage of men hitting on her and we're by no means jealous people. So I've witnessed this multiple times and her reactions are somewhat indifferent. I will say, if another man for her was the answer, she'd tell me or she'd have some inkling maybe? There's no telling, but I think the problem is deeper than superficial attention from a different person. And you might be right. And if this is the case, so be it. However, I'll live with peace knowing I left no stone left unturned. Crazy thought. I know I would be disappointed and saddened if she did leave for another man that would accept the bare minimum, but I'd also feel a peace knowing it's not all my fault. I know I'm responsible in some way to some degree. That's just marriage. I know sadness and depressing will creep, but we'll both overcome. But if this does happen, at least there will be clear reasons and clarity as to why it did. Also, I know for a fact that she wouldn't cheat. We're both very blunt, open and transparent. She would definitely tell me that she wants to step out on our marriage before it actually happens. As would I. We owe ourselves this respect for each other and we actively practice it.